traditional Christian story. Okay? So there seems to be this opposition between physical beauty, which is seen as a risk, as a danger, and spiritual beauty. In Christianity, the idea is that you shape yourself beautifully inside yourself through your good actions. And then after this life, in the other world, yes, in that world, beauty, true beauty that you can see, will be the same as goodness. That's why visionaries describe the beings from the other world, the angels or the Virgin Mary, all this, as being extremely beautiful, resplendent with light. In that case, in the other world, but not in this one, beauty and goodness will coincide. But in this one, from the Christian and the Neoplatonic point of view, not so. Physical beauty, if anything, is a distraction or a great risk, but not in Neoplatonism. Now, these two ways of looking at the relationship between beauty and goodness have gone hand in hand throughout the 2,000 years of history since the beginning of Christianity. And at some points in history, the Greek perception, the Greek perspective on the connection between goodness and beauty has flourished, such in the Renaissance, and some other times the opposite. But the two of them the Greek perception of this connection has remained in existence, and it flourished in a more astounding way in the 20th century under the Nazis, in which, well, if you were beautiful according to a particular concept of beauty, you were better, and therefore you should use your power and your superiority over the ugly ones that have to be eliminated. Let me say now a few words about human nature. We've talked about natural law, but of course natural law contains itself a reference to the natural. Now, what is natural for humans? Is that nature the basis for our recognition of what is right and what is wrong? What is human nature like? Is human nature good or evil? Or is it a blank slate? What is it like? Well, this has been an ongoing debate for at least 2,500 years. Confucius in the 6th century BCE was debating this. And of course, it's been debated all throughout Christian history. For Confucius, human nature was pretty much a blank slate, and it was through performing certain rites that you shaped yourself. Confucius' idea was really interesting because in the Christian West, the idea has always been that you have to change your heart. It's a change of heart that matters. And then actions will come out of that change of heart. But not so for Confucius. For Confucius, your heart doesn't really matter that much. You shape your heart through your actions. You perform certain rites. If you want to be a filial son, which was a great virtue in ancient China, you behave like a filial son. You perform the rites, you bow before your father, you do the things you have to do and say the things you have to say. And by doing those things, you will become a filial son. You will develop the virtue from the outside, starting from the outside. Now, there is some of that stuff also in Christianity, in the Christian history, although not much. But there is a major book of Christian spirituality, a medieval book of Christian spirituality, called The Imitation of Christ, part of which you need to read for one of the classes this semester. You have it on Moodle. It's called The Imitation of Christ. And the idea is, well, we cannot possibly understand why Christ behaved the way he behaved, why he did certain things, but what we have to do is to imitate what he did. And by imitating it, we'll end up understanding it. We'll end up shaping ourselves like we have to in doing what he wanted us to do. That's the idea. So it's a very interesting concept. But then we have Mencius, for example. Mencius was a philosopher, an ancient Chinese philosopher who lived about 100 years after Confucius. And he says, no, we are born with the seeds of goodness. We are born with the seeds of goodness. And those seeds need to be cultivated through the Confucian rites. But the Confucian rites would not do any good unless we weren't born with those seeds of goodness. And so he, as proof, as evidence for that, he says, if we were to see someone who's about to fall into a well, wouldn't we all feel a strong tendency to save that person, to prevent them from falling into a well? And the answer is yes, therefore we are born with those seeds of goodness. Well, other philosophers, later philosophers, said, no, that's not true. We are actually born with, if anything, the seeds of badness, but we have to straighten that up and shape yourself through education into being good people. The Christian perception of it is, of course, that human nature was originally good, as created by God, but then through original sin, however you want to explain original sin, human nature fell into a chaos. The whole of nature, the physical nature too, fell into a state of chaos. And so we have this special weakness in our heart, this special tendency to do evil, to be selfish. Right? And so we need religion, and we need to make an effort, and we need special grace, help from God to be good and to be moral and to be. Yeah. St. Augustine one of the greatest Christian thinkers who lived in the 4th and 5th century of the Christian era, in the 300s, late 300s and 400s. In one of his works, his Confessions, makes a joke on this, which I think is very funny. I mean, you may not find it that funny. It's definitely 4th century humor, but I think it's still funny. He actually makes a joke to Jesus, I should say. When he writes, he is pretty much addressing Jesus, okay? Oh Lord, this and that. And so he is talking about children, and he's pretty much of the idea that we are born with this tendency to be evil that has to be corrected. And he tells us how when he was a teenager, he used to go with his friends to his neighbor's orchard and steal pears from a pear tree. Were we hungry? No, we weren't hungry. Did we need the pears at all? No, we didn't. We just enjoyed stealing them. It was so much fun. Well, there you are. That's evil. That's sheer evil, he says. And then he remembers when Jesus says in one of the Gospels about children, he says, oh, let the children come up to me, because unless you become one of them, or like one of them, you will not enter heaven. And Augustine says, but oh, Lord, how can you say that? What do you mean? You must mean that we have to become like children in size, no? Right? We have to shrink and become, because otherwise it's incomprehensible what you mean. I mean, how can we become like those little devils? He doesn't say that, but you know. So this debate over human nature has also been present in Christianity. Okay, starting with Jesus, who appears to say that children are good, and Augustine, who is not really of the same opinion. Okay, let's talk now about value systems. Value systems. A value system is very simple, easy to define. It's just a hierarchy of values that you establish in accordance to a certain goal that you want to achieve. If your value system, if you're a man obsessed with money, your value system is going to have to do with making money, and whatever leads you to make the most money and the most easily, then that's what you're going to value the most, right? If your value system is the therapeutic value system, health, then the same. Anything that's taking you to being a more healthy person, you're going to value that the most in relation to how much it brings you to that goal, okay? If your value system is beauty, aesthetics, well, same thing. If your value system is a moral value system, then whatever brings you closer to being a holy person, you will value that more than other things. Okay? And there may be many value systems. I'm just giving you these 4 examples, okay? But there may be more. Sometimes those value systems may intersect. You may do something which is good for, for your health and for your beauty and for your pocket, and also spiritually or religiously speaking, maybe also good. For example, fasting. You decide to fast once a week, for example, okay? That may be good for your health. It may help you lose weight if you need to lose weight. So it may be good for your looks as well, and it may be good for your pocket because you save that money, and it may also be spiritually good. You may perform that act of sacrifice for some spiritual purpose. But for the most part, things do not intersect in that way. In other words, if you want to achieve a goal, you have to be single-minded. And being single-minded necessarily means to exclude, to discard, to give up the values that belong to different systems. Let me ask you a question. Was Mother Teresa a beautiful woman? No, she was not. Thank you. She was not beautiful. She was very ugly, actually. Yeah, she was an ugly woman. And was she a healthy woman? No, she was not. She was very unhealthy. I mean, she did things which we would consider unhealthy, to be with the dying, the lepers, and all this. Not really a healthy thing for us to do. So she was, plainly speaking, an old, ugly, unhealthy woman, right? Did she care about it? No, she didn't care. Did anyone care about it? No one cared, because it was clear that she was pursuing something else. She was pursuing something else. And in fact, we found it easier to believe that she was a holy woman because she was so physically broken. It would have been harder to believe that we found that kind of a holiness in a Hollywood actress-like kind of person, right? Maybe to a certain extent, Princess Diana may have been kind of the weird example in there, but she died too young. We don't know really, how holy she would have been. So anyway, there we have a person who was single-minded in pursuing her goal, holiness. Now, if you were to tell a person who's single-minded about achieving some goal, if you were to kind of offer a judgment that comes from a different value system, you would find kind of a perplexing attitude in the person. So you have this friend who's really concerned with money and only with money, and who spends his whole life in front of the computer screen watching the stock market go up and down while his heart goes up and down at the same time. And he doesn't take care about his health. He eats junk food, and of course he doesn't give money to charities because he wants to make money. He couldn't care less about looks or anything. Well, if you were to tell him, but look, I mean, you look terrible, you're becoming overweight, and what he would tell you? Well, he'd say, but you know how much money I made today? I made $300,000 today. What do I care about my looks or my health or anything else, And if you were to tell someone who's concerned with beauty, very concerned with beauty, and going through all of these plastic surgeries and spending his or her money away and putting his or her health at risk, if you were to try to get them to reflect on what they are doing and say, look, you're squandering your money and you're really putting your life at risk with all of this, well, the person might say, but look at the results. Look, I look great now. Don't I look great? Well, for them, all of that risk and expense is worth because they're achieving their goal. In other words, value systems tend to be, when taken to their true limit, incompatible. You either go for one thing or for the other. You can go for all of it at the same time. Now, most of us are really mediocre and we want to be rich and good and